It's Major Label Debut, the podcast about major label debuts. I'm the host of the podcast. My name is Graham Wright. University, or college as our American friends might call it, is a natural place for bands to form. You're in this whole new world. You're surrounded by all these new people, these potential bandmates. You've got some independence now. You're allowed into bars now. Maybe your school has a radio station. It's perfect. Guster, whose 1999 Sire Records debut Lost and Gone Forever is the subject of today's show, are, for my money, a quintessential college band. They formed at school, yes, back in 1991 at Tufts University, and their instrumentation back then was so college. Two guys playing acoustic guitars and singing, and another fella playing some hand percussion, some bongos, you know? These are all perfect instruments for storing in your dorm room, for rehearsing with in your dorm room without disturbing your fellow students, for transporting to gigs, for cramming on stage at the local campus pub. There is really no finer way to set up a group of on-the-go undergraduates. Guster's sound and lineup has evolved since those days, of course, but that spirit is still very, very present in all of Guster's work. Now, the other thing about starting a band in college or anywhere is that in the early days, it's so about your community, your friends, family, fellow students, coworkers. These are the people you can cajole into coming to your gig. You can convince to listen to your demo. You will stop at nothing to engage them. In the old days, Tokyo Police Club would bake these TPC cupcakes. You know, we'd put TPC and icing on them and hand them out to the audience under the theory that dessert-related bribery was the key to success, a theory that may have turned out to be totally true. My point is that there's a direct relationship between band and audience, and in the early days of your band, it's literally everything. It's what you have. It's what makes your band real. And then the thing about the music business is that it exists between those two groups. So the deeper you get into it, the more that band-audience dynamic tends to change. And yet, even after 3 decades, 9 records, hits, tours galore, Guster seems not only to have held on to that relationship with their audience, but to be more in touch with it than ever. That's remarkable for any band, let alone one of Guster's stature. Or maybe, as you will hear in this conversation, it's exactly the reason that they have that stature in the first place and have kept it for so long. When I spoke to founding member and singer and guitarist Ryan Miller of Guster, they had just wrapped up their We Also Have Eras tour. On that tour, they didn't simply play music from across their career in chronological order. They presented what amounts to an entire play, like a narrative performance with different sets and lines and scenes and marks for them to hit. And in there, they played a bunch of songs from across their career in chronological order. That's a huge amount of work to put in. Not a lot of bands like Guster are out there doing all that extra work on top of, getting rehearsed for the tour. That's as much as I ever did. I'd learn the songs again, more or less. By the 3rd or 4th night, I'd have them down flat. All of which goes to say, I was so excited to talk to Ryan about how Guster has conducted their career, conducted their lives, and how the music business part of the equation has factored into all of it. This is honestly one of my favorite conversations I've had since we started this thing, and I'm happy to finally be sharing it with you. Ryan and I spoke back in the winter, so there's a few references in there that are a little out of date, but you'll get the gist. It's nothing crazy. We started our talk discussing some, let's say, less desirable souvenirs that get brought home from tour sometimes. And then from there, we just went off into the conversational stratosphere. So enough of me yakking by myself. Let's listen to me yakking with Ryan Miller of Guster. Here it comes. Ryan, you are in Vermont, right?
I am in Vermont.
You must have about the same weather there that we have here in Toronto, which is slightly snowy, hovering around 0 Celsius, up and down.
Yeah, I was gone on tour for most of January, February. I was home for like a few days, and then we just had winter break with my kids, and we were down south. So I'm just now kind of like reacclimating to, oh, right, winter is still going to last another 3 months, same as you.
Usually one of the benefits of the deep freeze is that all the allergens are temporarily neutralized, but evidently in your case, there's something that's escaped containment.
Not a fun conversation to have, but I got dressed for this, and I put on a shirt from my bag, and I wonder if it was something from Savannah, Georgia that was in, you know what I mean? So
I know
it's
exactly
a mystery
what
that
you
won't
mean.
be solved, but I'm feeling slightly better. So I think I might have found the culprit. We'll see.
I'm glad to hear it. One of the joys of touring is that you get to pick up various allergens and dust motes from all over this great world and take them back and forth. Super spreading.
Right? You wouldn't have thought that I would have gotten, desensitized at this point from the amount of germs that I've been exposed to over my adult life, but not the case, unfortunately.
We spent a couple years selling our own merch on tour, and it took me 2 years to realize, geez, I never used to get sick on tour at all. I was really proud of it. I'm never, ever sick at sea. And then all of a sudden, I started getting 4 colds a day, and it took me a year and a half to realize it's because you're just touching filthy money and breathing everyone's germs all night.
And hanging with the proletariat. It'll do you every time.
And yet, we go back for more and over and over again.
And here we are.
How was the tour?
It was great, man. It was really, honestly, it's crazy to say, but we're at least 30 years into this thing, and kind of the best tour that we've ever had, most successful, numbers wise, most audacious, because we kind of wrote this play around it. I don't think those things are unrelated. Vibes were good. Morale was good. No one was mad at each other. I did get sick. I never get sick either. And I got the flu for a full week of the 3.5 weeks, which is a bummer. But yeah, especially considering the political climate we were going into and wondering what it was going to feel like, starting a tour on January 23rd in America, going through the Midwest, and surprisingly just really fantastic. Yeah, really, really inspiring and really rejuvenating. Just such a home run. Totally.
I'm so glad to hear it. We had a show in St. Louis. We did our farewell tour in November, and we had a show in St. Louis on Election Day. St. Louis, not our number one market. So it was also, you see the shows you see approaching on the ticket sales list, and you're like, oh, well, this one's going to be kind of a... And instead, it ended up being one of the most special shows of the tour. And I think you could sort of feel as the night went on and as the vibes really started to shift, everyone was getting closer together and holding on to each other and to the moment we were having. And on stage, I found myself going over to the other guys more and going to the audience more. And that there's obviously something in that connection that means a lot right now.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I think we kind of set out, or at least I did, as the interlocutor of the band to not make it about stuff and kind of have it be around the experience of people, and probably some people that aren't Democrats in the room. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And not trying to make enemies out of people. So I really felt like there was a lot of joy in the room every night. Our music tends to do that. Our shows tend to do that, especially at this point. We've been doing this for so long. A lot of the people who are coming, especially to this particular show, it's like the music of their life, in the same way that I have music of my life. It's not, it's not my band that I listen to, but there are bands that me and my kids will go to, and we'll be we're going to have moments in those shows. We're going to go see Father John Misty, and we went and saw Slow Dive with my kid. You know what I mean? So there's stuff that kind of ebbs through us, and being that receptacle is really powerful at this point.
I wonder if it's so turned up right now, too, because it's one of the few things that a lot of people still do that doesn't happen on the screen that you and I are talking to each other on. Because now interviews are on the screen, and work is on the screen, and play is on the screen, and porn is on the screen, and stocks are on the screen, and the news is on the screen. But a show, thank God, is in a room. It's in 3 dimensions. And I wonder if people are their tolerance for that has changed, so it hits them doubly hard.
Yeah, I think especially around, I don't want to be too self-aggrandizing here about the church element of it, but I do think that there is that thing where we go and we're kind of on an atomic level, we're kind of all in this soup, and these songs conjure emotions, and there's a real energy vortex. I mean, this, you played in a band for decades, and in those nights when that continuum started flips, and you put you get it and you flip it and you get it back, and it kind of just spins out of control. And I do think that against the backdrop of technology and polarization and just an abject like falling apart of the world, like those moments make it even more special. I mean, we're playing a couple shows at the Kennedy Center. I don't know if you've heard, but Trump took it over and wants to turn it into the cultural mouthpiece of him and his ilk. And a lot of people are canceling, and we're not going to cancel, And I think part of that is that there is power in being in that space with those people, knowing that our beliefs are pretty well known in terms of like what our politics are, how we feel about, two of us have queer kids. One of the guys in the band has an environmental nonprofit. He's run for 25 years, testified in front of Congress. I wore a dress on stage, in Florida last year to protest the drag ban. So like, there's something about speaking truth to power to, even though we're not saying it, around that. And I do think that that is part of why these, like, being together really feels so much, there's so much more import to it than maybe there was 10 years ago.
It certainly felt that way to me on the tour. It feels that way to me at shows. It's funny, right before you mentioned church and disqualified it, or qualified it rather, I self-censored myself from asking a question that involved that exact concept. So I guess we both know exactly what it feels like.
Yeah.
It does feel spiritual, Well,
especially as a non-religious person. And like, I remember like the first show that I went to after Trump was elected in 2016, I think it was Stevie Nicks. And there was like 17,000 people. And I'm like, well, we've got this. You know what I mean? I know that that's not all bleeding heart liberals with queer kids. And I'm like, and yet we are all here at the Church of Nicks, and she's a fucking weirdo from outer space, just a total, fairy from another planet. And we're all just enraptured. And it gave me a lot of hope. And I think I kind of draw upon that to remember, when I'm up on stage, and even maybe like thinking about my laundry that I have to do, or an email that I forgot to write or something, is wont to happen after you play, 2,000 shows in your lifetime. But yeah, it does verge on spiritual, especially from coming from a relatively godless person.
I remember learning like a decade ago from a podcast about how it's the idea of how you can, even if I tell you I'm going to make a big loud noise and then I make the big loud noise, it's still, your body still shakes because I guess your ears get the sound faster than your brain thinks about the sound. And that, I think that's really beautiful in relation to what you're saying, is like, oh yeah, you can go to the show as whoever you are, believing whatever you believe on whatever side of whatever divide there may be. But the music is hitting you before the brain part of you that has all that bias or whatever in it gets to get involved. You can't help but experience it on the same level as everyone else because it's happening physically. The waves are hitting you all at the same time.
Yeah, and especially if you're watching Stevie Nicks and Rhiannon, which probably short circuits even more brain pathways that we didn't even know about. That just like, oh, this is happening. Yeah, it's a very privileged position to be in, to be able to be that kind of cipher and stand at the center of that battleship every night. The older I get, the more I do it, the more I'm cognizant of that privilege and sort of humbled by it.
So when you were young, back to the beginning of Guster, obviously you start with a different sense than you gain after 3 decades of doing it. Do you remember what being in a band meant to you then?
I mean, I had sort of like 12-year-old. I mean, I remember, I don't know what your like origin story was. Like if you had a moment, you're like, oh, fuck, I want to do that. Do you have one?
I can't remember like a eureka instant, but I remember I grew up with music videos. I grew up in the 90s with Much Music here in Canada, and sort of turning on the TV and seeing not hearing the music, but seeing the bands play it and seeing the bands get interviewed, and sort of having this instant realization that, oh, that's Canadian guys. And it was a lot of Canadian guys back then. Get to be on TV and make the music that is, that is moving my soul. And if they can do it, then I want to do that.
Yeah.
So that was it for me.
Yeah. I mean, I'm probably not, mine was a Scorpion song, dating myself, but I was like, oh, okay, I could maybe do that. But then I was never like a shredder. I never studied music theory. I never practiced. So I'm a pretty unlikely candidate for this. I mean, I'm sure you probably also know guys who were like 10x the musicians that you are that didn't have a 20-year career in a touring band with
Oh my God, yeah.
and the experiences you had probably traveling the world. So I don't know that I ever had ambition, to be a professional musician as much as I just kind of wanted to be a rock star. And then was in a band in high school. It was like, oh, that was really something. Like I really liked that, and like came right into college and met the two other dudes that I started the band with because they were also in bands in high school. I was kind of looking specifically for people who had been in bands who like knew how it worked and like had some kind of discipline around, well, let's like, and we taught, this was like the beginning of our tour. It's like an origin story. It's like a chronological because we also have eras. So we tell the story, but it's me and Adam meeting in the dorm room and him being like, yeah, I was in a high school band. We played songs by like the Grateful Dead and the Who and the Rolling Stones. And I'm like, oh, I really only listened to Depeche Mode and The Cure and New Order. It's like, maybe we should write a song together. And that's kind of how the show starts. But it's true, honestly. So yeah. And then I think we just kind of like, the band just sort of like happened beyond our, I wouldn't say our wildest imagination, but just happened practically. Like it just doesn't usually happen that way. And I don't think we were like, well, I don't know, maybe we were particularly skilled, but not in a way that you would think. Like maybe melody, and our drummer played with his hands, which gave us some kind of novelty aspect of being able, like a visual thing. Two of the guys were good looking. I wouldn't consider that I wasn't that guy. I was like the ugly one. So I don't think that hurt. But then I think we went to like a good school. So we were like serious about it. You know what I mean? We like I got really lucky. The dudes that those guys I met were like, had their shit together and weren't super toxic to other people or each other. And we all kind of like found each other. And I think that brotherhood really carried us through figuring out how to be good songwriters, which probably took us a couple years, till we really had a record. I was like, even though some of the songs from our first album thing, I was like, okay, those are terrible recordings, but there's a song in there. So yeah, I definitely maybe thought I wanted to be a rock star when I was 12, but I had no idea that I was going to be.
I had this image. I really liked being with the band. You'd walk towards the venue, all of you together, and you'd all dressed the same and same long hair and everything. And whenever someone would say, oh, you guys must be in a band, I would take that as the ultimate compliment.
Yeah. The brotherhood of it is really interesting, and like the shared language between other musicians and band members, and how you learn how to be a band both internally and externally. Like a big part of how I think at least I transitioned into adulthood was we had gone on a tour with Bare Naked Ladies when they had the number one song in the States, and they were adults, and we weren't really adults at that point. And I was like, oh, you guys are all like grown ass men with kids and you're still doing this. And being able to peek behind the veil and understand that they were completely, dysfunctional in a lot of ways. Like they weren't this beautiful, and obviously that's played out in certain ways, but also like how they communicated with one another and how they had balance with each other. I think that was cool. Like it moved from the van years into like, oh, wow, we can maybe do this as men and as husbands and fathers. And I had never seen anything like that until we really got to know those guys.
You mentioned the hand drumming, and I recently realized that Blister in the Sun has only hand drums, and it sort of blew my mind because I remembered that song differently. And then when I was, deep diving on Guster for this too, I was really trying to listen for the differences and the similarities. And I forget, halfway through listening to a song, it just all sounds like music to me. How did that come together? How did that start? Was it just a dorm room necessity?
It was a dorm room necessity. I mean, we met on a bus, and first day of school, they had been in a band, and I was like, oh, we should jam. And he's like, Brian brought his bongos to school. And I was like, okay, you seem cool. And then he just kind of played them, and we were like, all right, well, we'll start here. But of course, we're in college as freshmen. No one brought their drums to school. So there was no drummer, and we didn't really have a bassist. And we were kind of like doing the acoustic harmonies thing with the bongos. And it just started there. And I think it was just kind of working from the beginning. We were able to play around campus and get in a little car. And it was just, so then we didn't really mess with it. I mean, on our first record, we put bass and drums on the record, but in terms of touring, I think we were then it was like people were saying we couldn't really do it. You're like, well, you have to get a bassist. And we were like, well, fine, fuck you. And we don't. So that kind of fueled it. I mean, I think on our records, we definitely went into the sonic thing. And then Brian, he started with three, a bongo or set of bongos and a conga. Then he got another one. Then he had a tambourine, and that kind of expanded. And then eventually got kick triggers, and we learned how to, like, Adam got an octave pedal, and we started to really pay more attention to sonics instead of just like, we're playing all the time and everybody's just doing this the whole time. And then it was like he was and is a very original player. Like, there's no false modesty. Like, there isn't anybody that really plays drums like that in that way. So, and he's a very unique player. So I think, again, that helped just kind of give us a sonic signature and helped us stand out in like a sea of probably decent songwriting college bands. But that was at least kind of a hook. And then we just developed around that and really just kind of leaned into it.
I was talking before about the, the physics of the sound hitting you and stuff. There's something I find really, like, not primitive in a qualitative sense, but just in terms of like hand making rhythm is one of the oldest possible. I'm drumming on my knee all the time, and I was listening something like Rainy Day, the last track on Lost and Gone Forever. It's really easy to imagine how a quote unquote traditional rock combo, a traditional rock drummer on the kit would do that big epic ending in a way that maybe would be a little like a hat on a hat, and having instead what sounds like just primitive striking skin underneath as the song builds is like, it holds back, it keeps something from you in a way that beckons you forward. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially like in my old age, as a creative person, I do a lot of things outside the band, film score and writer, and I thrive in limitations, and I love a sandbox to play in. And I think the limitations that we accidentally sort of put on ourselves really helped us explore that more than if we were bass, drums, guitar, and just that kind of band of like, oh, well, you can kind of do anything. And what do you do? And it's like, well, there's not a lot we can do in this thing. And I think the limitation that we had placed on ourselves helped us kind of find a thing that really peaked on Lost and Gone Forever. See, Lily White really understood that and was like, we're not using drums on this record. This worked. Like, he saw us play live and he was like, that worked. We're going to do that in the studio. And that was the first time we ever made a record that I felt like captured what we did and actually was past it.
That's so interesting. I've had similar experiences where, we were talking to a bunch of producers and I want to get the story on how you hooked up with Lily White. But that moment, everyone has ideas, or everyone has pitches, or everyone has visions, and they hear the band and they're like, oh, I know how we can take this band to the next level. My favorite producer we ever worked with, the way that we linked up with him was we were taking calls. And he was the guy who said, sounds like you guys kind of got something going on. Why don't we do that?
Who was it?
Rob Schnaff.
Was he Elliott Smith?
Yeah. The first episode of this podcast, I talked to Rob about.
Oh, that's great.
EXO. Yeah, he's an incredible producer, an incredible mind, and really good at meeting the band where they are and capturing the band rather than trying to take the band and put them in the new box.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we just finished our 9th album, and we've worked with 9 producers, kind of. I mean, plus or minus, we worked with a couple times, but none of them worked with when they tried to bring us somewhere that we weren't already kind of headed, where they didn't pour gas on a fire that existed, for sure. I mean, it's a dark art to be able to do that.
Absolutely.
I have a tremendous amount of respect for great producers. There's not a lot of them.
And it's I don't know if it's a dying art, but it's certainly a changing art. I mean, now I feel like a lot of young musicians are coming up, learning to produce at the exact same time as they learn how to play and write and be as a band, because it all just, again, happens on this screen.
Yeah, you don't need a studio. Yeah, I mean that's the thing. I mean, look, I can't show you, but yeah, this is where I make. I've done 15 film scores in here and written probably a third of the Guster songs since I moved here. And you don't necessarily. I mean, it's not even that and you don't need them anymore, but they would probably all help. And you have to find other ways of allowing those really. It's funny, like again, like the older I get, the more that I'm like, oh, I want to hire a drummer. I want to hire somebody. Like I want to hire a keyboard player. Though I could play it. I want to send this to you, my keyboard playing friends that aren't hacks, even though I can play the part. It's like you can sense those producers. Like maybe Rick Rubin's not a good example because he's, I don't know, maybe kind of a phony. It remains to be seen, but like they have a flotilla of people. Like we did some songs with this guy John Congleton, who's a great producer, and Luke, who's in our band, kind of fell and is now working with John. And Luke has now been this guy. He's worked on like Tegan and Sarah and Sharon Van Etten and all the stuff that Congleton. He'll like send stuff to Luke, and I can see how it's working this other way of just like Luke is really, really great at a lot of things. And so you just send it to like these people and all this stuff filters back. And even though you could play all those parts as a multi-instrumentalist, you would never play those parts. It's quite beautiful that even though we can do this, it doesn't actually serve the music often.
It's I was just hanging out with my friend yesterday whose band actually just finished making a record with Congleton.
Who was it?
My friend Steve plays guitar in Pup.
Oh, yeah. I don't know them, but yeah.
Great Toronto punk band. Really fantastic. And the record, which I have been lucky enough to hear, it's the proverbial next step.
Yeah.
But it sounds like them. It sounds like someone listened to what excited them and poured fuel on that fire, as you say.
Yeah. And Congleton's really interesting. Like, I love him, and we both grew up in Texas too. And he's just like he's got a really dark sense of humor that I don't share with a lot of people. So I really I cherish our relationship. But in some ways, like it wasn't like a home run with us because he kind of like he has his thing that he does, and it's not necessarily what we do. Like he doesn't comp vocals.
Wow.
And he's like, yeah, he's like, well, at least he didn't. And we learned a lot. And also there was another producer, Richard Swift, who we worked with, who was also like that. And we learned a tremendous amount from like losing some of these and like, well, let's fix everything. It's like, bro, just sing it again. You want that bass down? You want that a little lower? Why don't you go play it lower? That was Swift's whole thing. And he and Congleton share a lot of DNA in that. And I so respect it, but it does not necessarily align with my instincts all the time. So he's a great example of an amazing producer. And you just have to kind of you have to have the right thing, at least for us. It's like you have to meet him at the right time. And I know there's one band I know he worked with and it didn't go like a couple of years ago. And then they came back to him and they're like, now we're ready, So it's a malleable dynamic situation for sure.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, like any creative act, it's like there's so many factors. It needs to be right person, right place, right time, right vibes, right
songs,
attitude, right
exactly.
weather, etc. Right songs, yeah. Where was Guster as a band, talking about, now you're in a certain place and you're, looking for certain things. When you hit the studio with Lillywhite to start working on this record, where were your strengths? Where did you need help? What was the band's meta?
Well, I think what's the sort of gestalt of the podcast? There's like a major label component to this, right?
Yeah, it's basically just sort of a way for me to talk about how making art within the auspices of the music industry changes and influences the way that we make, both the album and also like grow as artists, and the way that it helps and hurts and changes. And like, we all are compelled to make music within this system one way or another. And what does that mean for the art itself?
Yeah. And now I mean, I can't even imagine. I'd be so curious at some point to talk to you about what it means to be on a label now versus in the 90s.
Yeah.
But for us, I think it was huge because we had made our second record independently, had a really terrible experience with that producer, was just kind of a dick, and the engineer. And I'm sure we were dicks too, to a point, but
did they just want you to do like a different version of your thing?
They were just like, oh, we want this conga to sound like a kick drum. And it's like, it doesn't sound like a kick drum.
Sounds like a conga.
It's like, yeah. It's like, okay, well, use a sample or let's go to a room. You know what I mean? And the producer was this guy, Steve Lindsay. He was just a total dick and quit. And I had to like beg him to come back. And the record sounds like shit. And that was our second. And our first record, was really good for where we were in college. And
It sounds great. The acoustic guitar and it sounds really nice.
oh, well, thanks. But it just didn't like, it wasn't like, oh, that's a beautiful record, and maybe it ages in an interesting way. But, and then Goldfly, I just couldn't get around the recording. And I think at that point we were kind of like, well, fuck. But we were doing well live. Like we were selling out rooms. I mean, Lily White came to see us at Irving Plaza, and we were like selling out that room as an unsigned artist, which is pretty unusual at that time. And so I think we had it in our heads that maybe we weren't going to be a record band. Like we were going to be a live band. Like we're just like, oh, we're going to be like because we were also playing on the jam band circuit, even though we didn't jam, but we were playing Cat's Cradle and Music Farm and Wetlands and the Bayou and all these kind of touring rooms, but we didn't jam. So I think we had it was like, fuck, maybe we're not going to be that kind of band. We'll just be a live band. But Lily White had come in, and obviously his track record was insane. I mean, he made some of the best records of the 80s and 90s, like at least for me, to my ears. And so that was a really big deal for us to be like, oh, wait, what if we learn how to record well? Like, what if we actually learn to use the studio as an instrument? And he was such an incredible mentor for us and guide and cipher. And his ego was gigantic, but so playful and fun. And it was just like, it was like some of the best days of my artistic life were just making records with him because it was so much positivity and like he would pull it out of you. And he wasn't a musician, he didn't play anything really, but he would get you there. And it's not an accident that he ended up working with the level of acts that he did. And so that record for us and being in the major label system at that point, we were all wide-eyed and bushy-tailed and didn't really know what to expect. And a lot of stuff was happening in music, and we were kind of part of a wave, but not, the 90s were a weird time. And I'm not sure. Sorry, what's the question? I sort of lost my thread here.
Well, it was a pretty broad question in general about just sort of where you guys were at as a band, which is it's hard to know at the time. It's hard to know in retrospect. I mean, I think I got my answer, which is basically you guys were kicking ass live and finding your way into being recording artists.
Yeah, finding our way into being exactly like how do we make a good record and how do we kind of make this grow and how do we be authentic to ourselves? And, we were signed by Seymour Stein, who's like one of the legendary A&R guys of all time. And we were on an indie at the same time that we felt we had some nurturing and Lily White was such a good part of that. I mean, once the record was done, that was sort of a different era of like, okay, now we're like dealing with radio and we were going to play the radio shows. And what does it mean to have a single and all those sort of politics that come around it, but not in a bad way. I mean, I have relationships from those days that I still continue with. Like a lot of those people who were out there trying to get us on the radio, like our radio reps we're still friends with and friendly with. So I don't have any major bones about that process. I mean, I think there were a lot of good people who really cared about music and were fighting for things at that point. And certainly that record was the first time that I had ever felt like, okay, this feels like something that we could put into the canon of music that isn't asterisks or something like, oh, this costs $5,000 to make. And, something like that. It was like, oh, okay, there's some tunes on here that are well recorded.
How did the whole Sire thing come about? And was there any, major label stigma in your universe, or did you guys have any reservations about it personally?
No, I mean, I think it was huge for us because this was 99. So we graduated from college in 95 and, we were making a living. We never got jobs or anything, but I think, we're ambitious dudes that Brian and Adam's parents were doctors. I think there's we wanted, and we were all taking this very seriously. We created a street team called the Guster Rep or Gus Reps back then. Then that was not really ever done before. I really think that we were one of the first. That term didn't exist. We sent CDs to fans, and then we would show up at their college and stay on their floors. And so we were trying to really make this work in a DIY way, but also they weren't mutually exclusive. I mean, we were grinding and never really stopped grinding in a way of just going out and playing shows and writing road journals and doing newsletters and creating the rep program and really just thinking about this holistically about how do we grow this thing? How do we find our people? How do we expose ourselves? How do we find bands that we want to tour with and vice versa? And we weren't a radio band like Semisonic or Bare Naked Ladies, that was going to get big that way. We weren't a press band, that was getting an NME or that was hanging out with like the downtown scene in New York that was like epitomized by Meet Me in the Bathroom and that whole, like probably everybody that you played with for decades, So we were in this and we weren't a jam band because we didn't know how to jam. So we weren't in that thing and we weren't a folk band. So we kind of had this weird little pocket, which inevitably I think really serves us well to have a thing that's not easily quantifiable about what kind of band you are. But nothing really was like, oh, I know what that is. I mean, now there's sort of an association with a couple other college bands like OAR and Dispatch, who I think were very different from musically, but also started in college, also focused on touring. But those bands were younger than us. So I think there was a little bit of like, oh, there's this college bands that can write songs and know how to develop a fan base and are going to work their asses off and just tour all the time and make good records.
It's that old conception of like, how do you become, when I was a teenager, I was devouring all the library books and early websites I could about how do you be in a band? How do you do it? And the answer was always like, be a band that a label has to sign, be a value add for them rather than them being a value add for you,
exactly.
To put it in, blood-soaked industry terms. But, I've really been struck as I've been researching and going all around the Guster online universe by what I never know quite the word, community. You talked about the street team. You guys have like die-hard, amazing fans who want everything you're putting out there, and I feel like that's the Eras tour that you did with the play component and everything is the kind of thing that you can really do successfully when you have that core group. How quickly did that sort of start to develop? When did you start being aware of it?
I mean, I think it sort of started with the street team and the newsletter, and it was a little bit of like just coming out of the jam band world where it's like, oh, well, we're playing Shubas and we're going to be back to Shubas in like 9 months. So let's try and, maintain relationships and build a community. But I don't think it was like build a community like you guys all talk to each other. I think it was just like, a little bit of like the Fish thing, or Dave Matthews was kind of coming up at that time. And I don't think it was ever thought about this way because we weren't like marketing majors or anything. A lot of this was just really intuitive and just trying to be playful and sincere because we're not jerks. And I don't know that it was it wasn't really a top down thing, but it's really become a thing in the last like 10 years, I think. It's really when we've really kind of been like, oh, fuck, like people have grown old with us and we are that band for a lot of people and for their kids. And so like when we do our festival every year in Maine, it's like, 5,000 people a night and everybody's got Guster license plates. And we've played a lot in that space of let's do summer camp or let's do moth storytelling, or now we're really trying to figure out what that community is, how we can best serve them, how we can surprise them. Like we did an improv stand-up tour when the pandemic hit. And that was like, well, now we have it. And even this Eras tour was like, all right, we've got all this capital to burn. Let's see if we can pull this shit off. And now we did. And it's the day it was over. I'm like, all right, what the fuck are we going to do now?
Yeah. How do you top that?
And I was like, oh shit, I really wish I had seen that Feist show. Did you see the Feist show?
No.
Where she had done it. Like a lot of the people came on stage. It was like multimedia.
Oh, sort of in the round.
Yeah. And I'm like, God, why is Leslie so good at this shit? Like, that's where I'm interested. And I think I only say that because it's like, that's kind of like shows the engine that's working. It's like, oh, fuck, we've earned a little bit of leeway here that we can make up a song on stage and it doesn't have to be the funniest thing ever, but you appreciate that we're doing it. So now we can kind of use that and we can use comedy, have stand up, or we can do improv with an improv guy, or now we can do a play. And like, we've kind of earned it. And that keeps people compelled. Like what compels people to see us for the 25th time, and what compels us to play a show in Columbus, Ohio for the 25th time.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to just go up there And here's some songs from our new album.
It's been 18 months since our last show, so we're back.
Exactly. And I think we're all really, really cognizant of how do we keep this fresh for ourselves. Even now, we're kind of doing this, we're experimenting with TikTok a little bit, which is funny because it's a young person's medium. And one thing we did is we filmed these like things like, remember the time when, and we're kind of telling funny stories from, our decades on the road. And one of the ones we did, so we've done a couple this week. We're like kind of rolling. This was coming from our manager. Like, what if we just hire? We're like, fine, this is funny. This will be us. And we told these couple stories and they were fine. They got a few views. And then we told a story about a song that was sampled by The Game and Chris Brown sang on it. And then they didn't tell us until the day before. So we have this Remember the Time TikTok that literally as we speak, like, it was like at 10,000 yesterday and it's at 400,000 and all these people are coming in and a lot of them are like, take Chris Brown's name out of your mouth. And I'm like, block. But
Chris Brown has hitters online.
Oh,
there's a lot of, he's a dedicated army.
As soon as I hang up, I'm going to go block everybody because they're not happy. And they didn't tell us they sampled our song until the day before the record came out. We took the money and we donated it to a women's shelter. And we said, we just tell that story. And half the comments are like, oh, this is why I love you guys, and I'm like, right, like this is example of one of 1,000 hopefully in our lives where we've kind of tried to do the right thing and tried to do it with humor and sincerity. And I think it's those little like inflection points all over like a lifetime of making music that help endear a band to a fan base and vice versa,
So then, based on my experience with record labels, it seems almost impossible for me to imagine that at no point during your major label years did someone from the label start to maybe suggest some ways to top down the community, to exploit it. Did you guys have to be protective of that?
Well, there was like, it was not a lot, but there was definitely like a little bit of like, we don't hear the hit. We don't hear the single thing. We had a president from Germany at one of the labels be like, you need to learn how to dance. And we're like, what? And they weren't kidding. And we were like, that didn't last long, but we were like, oh, right. Like there was definitely a little bit of like, there's definitely some desperation and people didn't totally get it. And also we weren't selling a tremendous amount of records and we weren't writing hit songs. Like, just note to everybody, like the biggest hit song we ever had was Satellite, which we had turned in in a batch of songs and they're like, we don't hear it. And we had to go back and record another 6 songs. They didn't release that song until the 3rd single. And it's the only gold record we have, but it went gold 8 years after it came out. Like, it was just like one of those songs that kind of kept going. So, like, I don't think we were a no-brainer for a label in a lot of ways. Like, especially as labels started to change because they deal in platinum. It doesn't help them to have the band that could sell 300,000 records when they spend that much money. I still think we're unrecouped. Maybe we're unrecouped on a couple things, but yeah.
I mean, you kind of want to be unrecouped. It means you won the swindle.
You won the swindle. Yeah, you don't want to recoup.
You don't have to pay him back out of your pocket.
No way, man.
Did the relationship with Sire, because I know you're back self-releasing, you're back as an indie band now and have been for a few records, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're working with Secretly on some stuff. I don't know exactly, but it's like, it's kind of piecemeal. Like we have our radio relationships. We have a publicist that we love. We don't need art help. Like it's not, and we hire somebody for syncs. So I mean, when you go to a label, it's like, there's like 8 departments. And if you can hire 5 of them, it's like the mystique is sort of done. I mean, it would be cool to have a label. And I have like this weird little art rock band that with my friends from LA, and we're trying so hard to get like the smallest label ever to sign us just to kind of give us that stamp of approval. Cause I think it would be helpful.
Yep.
But like for a band like us, I don't think it, especially because we're not writing hit songs. Like maybe on our next record, if we had a huge song that's like, oh shit, like maybe it would make more sense because then they can really spend the money. But yeah, it doesn't seem very helpful for us right now.
Did it like go bad with Sire by the end, or did you run through your deal and then go your separate ways?
No, it was like we were on Sire for 2, and then they folded to Reprise. So then we were on Reprise, and then that whole thing went away, but we got picked up right away, went to Columbia for an album. Like, we were in this system for a while. And that by the time the Columbia deal had run out, we were like, all that stuff I just was talking about had kind of run its course. Like, is this actually, it's kind of what you said. It's like, what value do we have to this thing? Like, we're not writing hit songs. Radio is not playing our kinds of music. This isn't going to be helpful. And then we were on Network Records for a couple where our manager was as well. And there was some great stuff about that. And then Network completely changed how they did business. I'm sure, I bet everybody in your phone book, it was on Network Records at some point, from being from Canada.
Yep.
Including you, maybe?
We never were. I'm cleaning my place, and I found like an old spiral notebook from our high school band, which was the same guys and another guy. And in it, we'd meticulously written out, names and mailing addresses of all the cool labels we wanted to get signed to, and Network was top of the list. But
right, exactly,
that was as close as we got.
Yeah, I don't have like bad feelings. I mean, I do feel like being a 52-year-old dude, being in this cool, weird little art rock band that like wants to get signed. I'm like, wait, why do I want to get signed? And does that even mean anything anymore?
Am I still brainwashed by being a 16-year-old who loved looking at record corners?
Right. And obviously it makes sense for, chapel and stuff like that to like, when you have the button to press and you can kind of go wide. But I wonder for the sort of mid-level rock acts, I don't know. I'm so uncynical about music right now too. Like there's just shit that I'm so excited about. Like I just listened to the new Panda Bear record yesterday all the way through, and the last song I was like, oh, gonna have to listen to that one again, and just listened to it like 4 times in a row. And I was like, how cool is it that like music is still like so great,
I was on holiday in Scotland last year, and we went to a gig by that band Dry Cleaning.
Yeah.
And the opening act was this band called Dancer, who was a Glaswegian band. I'd never heard of them before in my life. And my wife and I both were just like, oh shit, this band is amazing. And it was just, I found myself, I was like crying, not because the music was great, but it wasn't movingly beautiful. It was just, I realized it had been so long since I just saw and loved a band in that like earnest, immediate, instinctive way. And we will have to speak again, because I need to get some advice from you on being uncynical about music. I find it difficult. I will, though. I'll ask you our traditional last major label debut question, even if this is only an ellipsis between now and part 2. The most important question, of course, which is, well, you were recording Lost and Gone Forever. What were you eating?
Oh my God. The best part. Such a good question, because this is fucking genius of Lily White. Lily White, this is his quote. I don't want a menu. I just want my supper. We had catering every night because didn't want you to worry about fucking thinking about shit. He wanted you to do your job, show up, and there's dinner there. And so for that whole record, we had caterers, like a guy, like, and the guy in the guy in Woodstock where we did it at Bearsville was this guy BP, was in the band X, which is hilarious. I know. And he was a fisherman. It was the best. Yeah. So it was like, he kind of took it off the table, which of course is an insane indulgence. I mean, kind of.
That's major label life, though. That's exactly what you should be spending the money on.
That's right. And not passing around a menu and being like, oh, I didn't get this, or oh, I'll have chicken parm. It's like and we would eat together too. And that was the other part of it. And so you would commune. And I think it was a really great trick. And it was probably worth every penny that we spent on that, where it feels indulgent, but probably served the music more than anything. So yeah, we were having, and it wasn't like caviar dreams and champagne wishes, it was chicken and fish and mashed potatoes, it was the guy from X.
But you just feel lighter when you're not like, okay, which of the 4 burrito places in LA are we going to get from tonight? And then how are the takes after I eat my burrito and bag of chips going to go?
Yeah, and you're in like rural Woodstock, New York in 1998. This is before the exodus from every cool Brooklyn kid. I mean, it wasn't that much to eat there. Yeah, so that is what we were eating, and it was a hell of a trick. It's a smart one.
Boy, I would love to make another record where I can have catering someday. We hired a buddy on like our first record. He sort of pitched us. He was like, just bring me in, give me like a budget. I'll make, butternut squash soup and like celery sticks with peanut butter and raisins on them. We were 20 years old, but it's like having a beautiful mom there in the studio just to
it's such
make
a good
you
idea.
a snack and get you some apple juice.
I know. I sort of forgot that. Maybe next record we'll just make that a line item. Even if it's just peanut butter and raisins, sounds great.
Yeah, just a little bit of loving care.
Well, I'm sorry I rambled, and I don't know. I'm sorry we didn't get to everything. I'm happy to chat again sometime.
No, it's great. I just think we have some more to say to each other. I feel like we're just scratching the surface. So let's talk about life and art.
Yeah, let's do it.
Listener, we did reconnect. Ryan Miller of Guster and I reconnected the very next day and had so much more interesting conversation that we here at the podcast have elected to, in a first in our long and storied history, have a part 2. That's right. Part 2 of my conversation with Ryan Miller of Guster is dropping on Friday, so stay tuned to the feed for that. Major Label Debut is produced by John Paul Bullock and Josh Hook. Thanks so much, guys. Our wonderful theme music is by my buddy Greg Alsop. Greg, we love you. You, the listener, the person whose ears these audio waves are reaching to right now, we love you too, and we thank you, and we value you. Whether or not we do the Major Label Debut Eras Tour remains to be seen, but even if we don't do that, it doesn't mean that we don't love and appreciate you and all of your engagement with our social media and our internet presence and our general success factory, algorithmic, computerized podcast support network. Anyway, that's enough talking for me, but Major Label Debut will return sooner than ever before with more tales from this intersection of art and commerce and Guster.